wrap up tonight with a presentation about our landscapes that are just starting to wake up right now. And here to discuss the environmental signals that trees and their pests receive in spring is Dr. Joe Zeleznik. Joel has been with NDSU Extension since 2002 as the forestry specialist. He works throughout North Dakota and in the intersection of prairie and forest in western Minnesota. Joel focuses on tree species diversity in our communities, as well as pest management and tree ring analysis. Joel, welcome to the forums.
Well, thank you for having me. Tonight, I want to discuss, I know this is titled The First Signs of Spring, but I really want to discuss more than just that, timing of ecological events. And it's called phenology. And this hopefully will be more of a discussion. And I have to say, that first slide is the robin. Okay, yeah, the first robin of spring. Spring's here when the first robin arrives, in theory. But there's a lot of robins that actually overwinter in urban areas in our area. What is it for you? What is your first sign of spring? Is it crocuses coming up? Um, how about how about hyacinths? They're pretty early. I love the aroma of hyacinths. They're just amazing. When I was a kid, this was the first sign of spring for me. It was the daffodils in mom's front yard. So it's going to be different for each of us. For a lot of people, oh, sorry, for trees, for me, the first sign of spring is maple syrup. Now, there's not a whole lot of sugar maple trees in North Dakota, so this is a little further east. And as you can see, the sap starts flowing sometimes when there's a lot of snow still on the ground. Yet, this is still, for me, this was always the first sign of spring. A new winter was coming to an end. More recent times, I started making some observations, and one of the first things I see blossoming are willow trees, and willow trees and willow shrubs. And I've already seen a few of these in our area a few weeks ago. And I know temperatures have been up and down. That same day, or later that day, or maybe even the next day, a silver maple was blooming. That was kind of neat to see. I've always said for me, the first sign of spring is the flowering of American elm trees. They got these tiny little flowers. They're really not very conspicuous. And if you look up in the elm trees, you see this little pink fuzz. That for me was always the first sign of spring. Yeah, now I might be leaning more towards the willows. So that's some of the plants. Animals, they're also the first sign of spring for a lot of people. You go to central North Dakota, this is the first sign of spring. The geese are coming back. The Canada geese, well, yeah, the Canada geese, because they come first. It was funny for other people. I heard this. Yeah, it's that first skunk of the spring. First time I smell a roadkill or, well, maybe a skunk sprayed a potential predator or an enemy. So this is their first sign of spring. And I had to think about that. And I said, yeah, you know what? That's right. That is one of the earliest things that comes around. That said, I want to talk about phenology. And what is phenology? Phenology is the timing of biological or ecological events and how they vary. So we talk about phenology and we're studying it. I'm a scientist. I want to study this. And how does phenology timing vary? So phenology is more or less predictable. This is going to come first. This is going to come second. This is going to come third, and so forth. The order is predictable. And how much heat do we need? We'll come back to that. One of the first things I see blooming, and in terms of woody plants, is forsythia. It's funny. I texted my mom today because I couldn't think of the word daffodil. I said, Mom, what was that? What was the first flowers we also always saw in the spring? She said daffodils and forsythia. I guess I never really realized that growing up that we had forsythias. Shows my observation skills weren't good as a kid. Okay. Phenology timing also includes fall events. So trees turn color in the fall and they lose their leaves. But this is all part of phenology. Okay, phenology, as we can see, it affects both plants and animals. And in the spring, in terms of when things are waking up, breaking out of dormancy, or moving forward, it's often based on heat accumulation. How much heat has been accumulated in this day, this week, this month? And it's measured as degree days, or with plants and animals, growing degree days. And so, what are growing degree days? Well, first of all, it's based on physiology, and there's some base temperature that every plant or animal has, and above that base temperature, then they can develop and grow. And different plants have different base temperatures, different animals have different base temperatures, but above that, they can develop and grow. So I'll give you an example here. Oh, and after so much accumulation of that, after X growing degree days, Y happens. Okay, something happens. I'll give this example. Forest tent caterpillar. Forest tent caterpillar is that little insect right there that has just hatched. Well, actually, that one's probably 3, 4, 5 days old, maybe even a week. And it has hatched out of those eggs, and it's getting ready to feed. Forest tent caterpillar, they start emerging after about 150 growing degree days. Here's another example of that. These were from an apple tree right out in the yard back in 2011, I think it was. After about 400 growing degree days, apple trees are in full bloom on average. Now, it's going to vary a little bit from place to place, but this is a good ballpark to go for. Okay. So again, we got different base temperatures for different plants and animals. And for crops, these base temperatures have been studied like crazy. And so we've got tons of information about this. For other plants, well, maybe not so much. We don't have quite the detail, but we can figure out a few things. Okay, for example, here's some crops. Their base temperatures, they're in the white. Wheat and barley, they can grow once it's above 32 degrees. Sugar beet, 34. Sunflower 44, corn 50. I've always heard you don't plant corn until the soil is at least 50 degrees. And I don't know if that's true. I'm not a corn farmer, but that's what I've heard. Okay, insects start developing, depends on the insect, above about 50 degrees. And it was very interesting to hear earlier Jan Knodel mentioned yucca moths, because we're going to talk about yucca moths. So insects start developing above 50 degrees. And every day that it's above 50 degrees, the average temperature, there's an accumulation of heat. And here's the calculation if you're interested in it. Growing degree day, how many growing degree days for any given day, what was the average daily temperature, and you subtract that base temperature. If it was average of 58 degrees today and that base temperature was 50, we had 8 growing degree days. And over time, you just add up each day. And with that, oh, you can do that, or you can let somebody else do the calculations for you. I'm not sure if anybody has discussed the NDON network, North Dakota Ag Weather Network, Agricultural Weather Network. This is one of the websites, actually two websites for this right now. We've got a great system around the state of North Dakota, into Minnesota, into Montana, that where all these stations are measuring temperature, moisture, soil moisture, rainfall, and other environmental variables that can tell us what's going on in the environment. And we can use that information then to calculate growing degree days, among other things. Okay. For example, in barley, if we look at barley growing degree days, if we had planted barley on March 1st, here's how many growing degree days above 32 degrees Fahrenheit have been accumulated in North Dakota. And no big surprise here in the Southwest, it's a lot higher than it is, say, up around Langdon in the Northeast. okay, that warms from south to north. Okay, I think we know that. But with growing degree days, we can quantify that. We can put a number to it. So that's barley, that's a plant, that's a crop. What about insects? Insects above 50 degrees, how many degree days have accumulated? Okay, in the Southwest, about 155. Call it 150. This is as of yesterday. In the Northeast, well, just a few, only a dozen or so. Okay, that's great. It's the science behind it. By the way, uh, this is another end-on site. They're still using this. Sorry, they're still using that old one. This is the new one, endon.info. It's still being, the site's still being transitioned over to this endon.info. Otherwise, go back to that endon.ndsu.nodac.edu. Okay, I'm not sure what the issue is with the website, the computer system, but it's still being transitioned over. Okay, that said, this new site has a lot of other information like spring frost and freeze, which we'll come back to in a bit. All right, growing degree days. As we said, the order is predictable for both plants and animals. Okay. Certain things come out at certain times. And this leads to a coupling. Sometimes it's a pest and the host. Okay. After about 150 degree days, those forest tent caterpillars come out. Guess what else starts to come out? The first apple leaves. So the insect has really evolved to go on this host and start eating. Okay, they don't emerge until there's a food supply. So this happens throughout the world. All kinds of ecological pests. Sometimes it's pollinators. It's kind of funny. Jan mentioned yucca plants with yucca moths. Okay, the yucca moth doesn't emerge until the yucca flowers have emerged. So they're both going through an accumulation of heat in the spring, warm temperatures. And so in this case, it's not a pest, it's a pollinator. And that's really important. That's really critical. And one of the things people are worried about now is if it gets too warm, will the plants start flowering early, but the insects won't have emerged yet? And there's some real questions about this, some real concerns. And I wish I knew more. Wish I was able to predict what's going to happen. Okay. And so that's a coupling ecologically. Sometimes things are overlapping but not related. For example, okay, after about 90, maybe as high as 300 growing degree days, we start to see eastern tent caterpillars coming out. Well, that's about when we see forsythias coming out too. So if you want to uh, know what pests to look for, try to find these uh, ecological, what's the word I'm looking for? Shoot, identifiers. Um, that can be your indicator of when to start looking or when to start treating. Because sometimes we don't see the pest right away, but we might see a flower that tells us, hey, you got to look for this pest. Example is emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer, the first emergence of the adult is around 400 growing degree days. It actually peaks somewhere around 1,000 degree days. And that is about the same time that we see black locust trees flowering. Now, black locust is uncommon around here, but there are some around, and we can look at different species, plants, to give us this flowering, and we can hook that up with certain pests that we know to look for. So that's phenology. On a related note, or sorry, that's growing degree days, which actually quantifies, puts a number to phenology. Okay, the other thing I want to mention is the USA, the National Phenology Network. It's an organization that, well, organizes citizen scientists into going out and observing plants, observing animals, And they've got a lot of great research going on and a lot of great networks. This is one of the examples on their website. Um, excuse me. This is spring leaf index. How are leaves developing on plants? And this is actually just today. Okay, no surprise, it's south to north. It's what we would expect, but we can see how spring is advancing. I'm not sure what they're calling leaf index. I believe it's the first leaves are starting, or the first buds have broken, and they're starting to see leaves coming out. So we're close. So maybe southwestern North Dakota, first leaves are out. Okay, and then spring bloom index. Okay, the flowers are behind the leaves, and this is just a start. And they have this for throughout the country, throughout years of data. Okay, they also have predictive maps. Okay, emerald ash borer, the first emergence, 400 growing degree days. If there's emerald ash borer, sorry, in the orange this week, the darker orange, that's where it is emerging this week, 400 growing degree days. We go to the yellow, they expect that's where it'll start emerging next week. In 2 weeks, the green, and so forth as we move north. A lot of managers use maps like this to predict when they should go out and start looking for certain pests. So again, letting somebody else do the math is really handy. There's some great networks out there. Again, I do want to point out for the end on, if you look at the upper right here at the end on info, they have a climate pull down menu. And among that is frost and freeze normals. There's a lot of data here. I'm just going to show you some briefly what they can offer. Spring frost and freeze. Oh, last 36-degree frost date, last 32-degree frost date, or freeze, excuse me. Last hard freeze, 28 degrees. And I don't have the maps here, but I want to point out you can go look at these yourself. Real easy to find. Okay. The other thing I want to mention briefly, this is kind of a quick little introduction to phenology, how these biological events vary over time, year to year. They are going to change. I think we're going to have a little bit of an early spring. One of the longest records phenologically is the cherry blossoms in Japan. Their records going back over 1,200 years of when cherry trees are in blossom or blooming. They have cherry blossom festivals. And it's amazing that they can use this data then to figure out, are they blooming earlier or not? When or years or periods where they bloomed later? And there are a few of those in the last 1,200 years that correspond to some cooling temperatures. So there's all kinds of information available. Um, Year to year changes, but also phenology can vary depending on microhabitat, microclimate. This can also vary by elevation. You know, the further uphill you go, it gets cooler. You go into urban areas, it can be warmer. You can go on the north side of a building and it's colder there than on the south side. So you could see a day or two or even a week difference in blooming between the north side of a building, south side of a building. It's pretty amazing. With that, I think that's is very brief tonight. I just want to talk about the first signs of spring and open it up for questions. And I want to ask Tom, who is a
Yes,
great
sure.
gardener. Tom, what's your first sign of spring?
Uh, it's always the robin.
Okay.
It's the
Are there urban robins in Bismarck?
what hit. Well, yeah. They're what I think of. I'm kind of out in the county, but when I see the stupid robin that comes too early, I just go like, I see them freezing outside. I go, that's what it takes. That's just this is what did Darwin survival of the fittest. So that robin's not going to survive very much. So
Hmm.
that's a sign of spring. I love forsythias. That's such a splash. Like I love. You had great photos tonight, Joe. The crocus. It's all daffodils.
Yeah.
They're all beautiful, but I
Yeah,
don't
for
know.
me growing up, it was always those daffodils. There were these clusters everywhere. They were very pretty.
So, yeah, so underutilized in our state, I think,
Hmm. I
But
see there's a question there about does Canada have a network similar to the USA? I don't know. That said, I know that Minnesota does. Minnesota's got quite the observational network out there. Personally, I'm trying to recruit a few people to do some observations for me right now on bud break and bur oak trees along the Red River. I've got a bunch of folks in Grand Forks County who've offered to help. Would love to get some folks in Wahpeton or maybe as far north as Pembina as well. Just curious how that develops going south to north.
well, how about we can, does anybody have any questions out there? If anybody has any questions, just please just slide your mouse to the bottom of the screen and a Q&A box will appear. And we can just have a nice, pleasant conversation here. One person says that box elder bugs are the first sign for spring. What do you think about that? Is that
Uh,
right?
I don't know because they tend to overwinter in our houses.
All
I wonder
right.
what,
That's what they mean.
yeah, I wonder
When I,
what gets them to go outside. I don't know.
that's right. When you
Yeah,
had the box elder bugs crawling across your floor, your kitchen floor in March, that's the first sign. That's a good.
yeah.
I wasn't thinking about that. Does anybody
My
else? Yeah, Joel.
my
What do you,
mother-in-law used to keep track from year to year of the ice out date on the lake. That's another
oh,
thing that we can track year to year. How much heat have we gotten? Now, the ice out's a little different though because that also depends how thick did the ice get in the winter. So lots of factors go into this.
so you're an ice fisherman, Joseph.
I am.
You are.
That's
No, I do it once a year at the most. I think it's well, because I didn't have a nice ice house. So you just get out there with a bucket and you sit. It's like a test of manhood for about an hour or two. Then you say, "This is ridiculous. I'm going back inside." How about this? Anybody? Here's a question. Oh, they mentioned ice
okay.
out. Ice went off on the upper Cormorant today.
Yes. Yes. And it went, I'm about about 4 miles from Upper Cormorant, and ours went out, yeah, last night, overnight. We had a big rainstorm, so that was kind of fun to see. Ah, frogs croaking in the ditch. Larry, that's great. I have not heard any yet, but that is, yeah, the spring peepers. That's a good one.
Joe, there's a question about, do you think there's going to be, well, what kind of effect will there be due to the global warming concerns?
That's the million-dollar question, especially with those couplings where
Hmm.
certain plants need certain pollinators, like the yucca moth. That's a big concern. If the timing gets off, I can't say, I can't predict it. But that's the big question. We're gonna find out.
Okay, this person says their first sign of spring is a egret, when the egrets appear.
Okay.
How about that? Now we got a good weather network in North Dakota, the NDON, and now I wasn't aware we have ndon.info now, which is a new
Yes.
site. Looks really excellent. I'm going to check that out with those frost information.
I think it's more mobile friendly. The
Okay, good.
ndon.info is more mobile friendly.
How about does the University of Minnesota have a comparable site? Do you know? I don't know.
They do, and they have. Or they don't know that they have an NDON site. I don't know that they have an ag weather network, but they do have a team of people. I thought I had included it in my presentation. Apparently, I didn't. Uh, Backyard phenology, I think that's what they call it at the University of Minnesota. And it's, again, trying to get a network of citizen scientists out there to observe.
Okay, Joe, get out your crystal ball. When Will we be able to plant vegetables in the garden in Grand Forks County?
Yes, that's a great question. And Esther McGinnis had a really nice column on this about a week or two ago on planting potatoes. And the I think it was above 50 degrees. You need soil temperatures above 50 before planting potatoes. Does that sound about right, Tom?
That's right. That sounds good to me.
Okay.
And uh, and of course, it depends on the vegetable.
Yes.
When you plant a potato or a pea or spinach is not the same time that you're going to be planting tomatoes or sweet potatoes.
Right.
So you
Right.
gotta no easy answer for that.
One of the things I'm not sure exactly how to do it on Endon, and you might actually have to pose it as a question to their programmers, is ask them, what is the average date the soil temperature hits 50 degrees
Mm,
in our area? What is the average date the soil temperature hits 60 degrees in our area? They've got some great abilities there. I'm not sure how to make those maps myself. Years ago, I asked them, what is the average time in the fall for the soil temperature to hit 40 degrees? Because above 40 degrees, trees can still grow roots. Below 40 degrees, they stop. So I want to plant trees about a month in advance of that so that the trees can send out new roots for about a month before the soil freezes or before the soil gets 40 degrees. And they were able to make a map for me. It was really, really a wonderful resource. Um, and I'm not sure how to do that on their website, but
well,
boy, it's slick.
they
But
got soil temperature readings,
right.
daily updated
Yep.
for bare soil and turf soil. So, how about Joe? Since you're more of a tree expert, can we plant bare root trees now, for example?
If the soil is not frozen, absolutely.
Okay, just got to be able to dig through it.
Yep.
Okay, this person believes in Good Friday potatoes. That's when you plant them.
I've heard that too.
Doesn't
I've
work.
heard Good Friday, but I've also heard Mother's Day. Or is that for peas?
Well, can't be Good Friday. I've heard that too, but it makes no sense because, like, some years, Good Friday is very early. No
Yeah,
way.
it's a month or more difference
Yeah, that's
in
right.
Good Friday every year.
I like Esther's uh, temperature, soil temperature is the way to
Yes,
go.
absolutely.
And Don can find that information for you. Does anybody else have any questions? Let's see here. Okay. Well, we're just talking about general phenology here. I guess what soil temperature should you put the pre-emergent crabgrass herbicide on the ground?
I will defer to you on that.
Well, I would say, that's again, it's not a black or white issue, but the old the old rule of thumb is kind of like what you talked about, Joe, with phenology with the forsythia. When you see the forsythia just starting to show the yellow flowers, that's a sign that the soil temperature is high enough, and that's like about 55 degrees or so, that the crabgrass can germinate. And also you got to keep in mind, like also you had another uh, photo that, or diagram there, Joe, about like it's different in different areas of the city, or it's so there's microclimates. Like crabgrass often grows like near where there's heat because it can thrive in the heat, but the bluegrass can't. So near the edge of the driveway or in the boulevard, you might want to put on that crabgrass killer a little bit earlier, than when the forsythia is blooming, because the soil temperature right there is warmer to begin with. So when in doubt, you can go ahead and do it, because it's got to be on before the crabgrass emerges. Um, how cold can it be in a greenhouse for tomatoes and peppers? Well, they they can't take a frost. Just keep that in mind, and they won't actively grow, in the 40s or 50s. So it's kind of like Harleen talked about, with the greenhouse, you have to be concerned about the nighttime as well as the daytime. It may be really warm in the day, but at night it can be a little cold in the greenhouse.
Sure. I
Joe, when
saw
can we? Yeah, please.
the question there about buckthorn sprouts.
Yeah, just
Uh,
gonna
I
say that.
would I would suggest once you start seeing leaves start to emerge, Right now, they're still probably dormant. Yeah, they break bud early, um, but pay attention to when they're breaking bud, and then you can treat them
Okay, so you just would spray right on top of the young leaves.
as best you can. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions out there? Kind of have a nice okay, here's another some more folklore for you, Joe. I was told that serviceberry got their name because they show when the ground is right for burials. It's good to have a funeral service now because the serviceberry is popping out of its buds.
Yeah,
How about
that
that?
I have heard that as well.
Oh, really? Is that
Um,
is that the sprouts coming of the service
that's
or
okay.
the
The
flowers or
flowers. That's the flowers. Okay, serviceberry is also called Juneberry. We know it as Juneberry here. Saskatoon, further north.
right?
On the East Coast, it's called shadbush. And it's called shadbush because it flowers at the same time the shad, that's a fish, are running upstream to do their spawning.
Oh,
And so yeah, there's multiple common names. It's kind of funny. My column this week talks about common names, and I mentioned shadbush in there. So yeah,
oh,
shadbush, serviceberry, and that's the folklore I heard as well. I don't know if that's the truth, but that's what I heard.
wow. Well, okay. Any last comments? Anybody? Joe, this is just a nice, mellow way to end the forums. It was almost like an artistic approach we had tonight, plus educational. So thanks for giving us such a strong finish to the forums this year, Joe.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's it for tonight, everybody. And that's it for this year's Spring Fever Garden Forums. Please remember to spend a few moments and fill out the evaluation if you can. And thank you in advance for doing that. So this is the end of the forums, but Extension is always there for you. So if you have any questions, as the growing season progresses, please contact your county agent, and we are there to help you, right throughout the growing season. So, but for now, everybody have a good night and everybody have a happy spring. See you next year.